Hey viewers, welcome to the channel. Today we're going to talk about error handling in VBA. When you get a runtime error, VBA is going to pop up a message similar to this. Pretty much saying something's gone wrong, it's over to you. Now if you're the macro creator or developer, you've probably got this covered. If you're the end user, it's not very useful. You're highly unlikely going to click debug. And in most cases, you'll just click end. Now this will terminate the macro, however, it can leave things in an incomplete state. What we really need is for the macro to take control and provide a probably more detailed or more user-friendly message. Remove the onus off the user so they don't have to make any decision, and close down gracefully. And by that I mean to do any cleanup, close any open workbooks or database connections, etc. And it should do this silently without any user involvement. Now I'm just going to click end to terminate the macro. And what you'll see is I'm left with an open workbook that the macro had opened and populated the cell B2 with just a little bit of text, nothing too complex. So the user would probably see this and close it. But now they're asked to save. In this example, it's pretty simple. It wouldn't matter. However, if you had something more complicated, you had output a lot of data, then it's asking a little bit more of the user. Let's hop over to VBA, Alt F11. Now here is the macro that produced that error. You don't have to understand it in detail. It essentially opens an existing workbook, then sets some text in cell B2 of sheet 1, and then I force the error by trying to rename sheet 2, which doesn't exist. So the error pops up here, and because I clicked end, it doesn't move on to the next statement, which was to close the workbook and save it. But with error handling, we can ensure that the workbook is closed whether it was successful or an error occurred. And that's what we're going to cover in today's video. I'm actually going to split this over two videos. Today we're going to focus on error handling in parent subroutines. And by parent, I mean the topmost level ones, which are usually triggered by the user either via a button or perhaps a drop-down which is linked to a macro. And those subroutines may call other subroutines or functions, but the error handling those child methods is slightly different, so I'm going to handle them in part 2. So I'm going to add some error handling to this example, but firstly I want to create a template for all my parent subroutines that are going to have error handling in them. Now, you don't need to put error handling in every single subroutine. Think about the complexity. What would happen if it failed? Will it leave anything open that you need to close? Things like that. We're going to add some code here, and then I'll explain what it all means. We're going to add 2 labels, and I like to use the subroutine name as a prefix, underscore exit. You can call this whatever you want. You don't need to have the underscore, but you do need to have a colon. That designates it as a label, and a label is like a bookmark that you can jump to. After this, we're going to add exit sub, and then we're going to create another label, underscore error, colon again, and then go to exit. Now make sure you use the exit one and not the error, otherwise you'll end up in an endless loop. If you do that, you can hold Control and press pause or break button, and that should get you out of it. At the very top, you want to type on error go to, and this time we're going to specify the error label. All right. So this is the base of it, but I've got to add a bit more, but I'll just explain what this does. So here you would normally have your main code. that you want to run. Now, this on error go to says if there's any error when you're running that main code, go to this label here. So it'll jump down to here, and in here you'll have any code that is specific to errors, so when an error occurs, right? So it'll only happen when the error occurs. And then the go to is going to tell you to come back up to here. And in here, it's going to have code that you will always run, so whether error or not. Okay, so if the code's executing and there's an error, we jump down to here, execute any code in here, then go to here, execute any code here, and then exit. If the code is running and there's no errors, it just falls through to here, runs any code in here, and then exits. Now, using goto in the coding world is often frowned upon, but with this, I think it's perfectly okay. Unfortunately, VBA doesn't have any error handling construct like other languages. So, for example, there will be things like try, catch, and finally in some languages. Here is your main code. It says try, run this code. If there's an error, it will automatically go to this catch section, and then it will drop down into the finally. And this happens without any go-tos. It's just implied go-tos, really. So try the main code. If it's successful, just go down to the finally. Or run main code. As soon as you get an error, come to the error section and then come to here. So that's what I'm trying to simulate with my error handling. Unfortunately, we need to use go-tos with VBA. There's also one setting you need to ensure is enabled. I think it is by default, but if you go to Tools, Options, and then General, make sure that you have break on unhandled errors. If it's on break on all errors, it's going to ignore your error handler and always break and give you the default VBA error whenever one occurs. So select break on unhandled errors and click OK. Now, with most of my top level subroutines, I like to indicate that the macro was either successful or there was an error, and I do that with a message box. Now, we could put a message box in here to say, let's say successful, and also one down in the code that's specific to errors. Okay. However, I like the message box to be the last thing that gets executed. So if we had some code in here in the common code, say for example closing a database connection or closing an open workbook, which should happen on whether it's successful or not, that would happen after the message box. So I tend to put my message box in the common area instead. Now, we obviously don't want to say successful in both instances. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to have a variable which will contain a different message depending on whether it's successful or not. So let's declare it first. I like to declare my variables before the on error, but you don't need to. Dim message as string. So in here, when it's successful, we're going to say something like importing customer details was successful. Okay. Here, and in the error section, something different. Details. Now with the errors, I like to add the subroutine name. Now there's no easy way to get that, so I just hard coded. There are ways to do it, but it's not straightforward. I like to do that. And I also like to append the error number and description. So we can go VB carriage return line feed. That'll take it down one row, and I'll append another one to leave a gap. And then we're going to append the error number, error.number and error.description. And I'll probably put a colon space in between them. We need an ampersand here. Okay, so we're building a string with a message and error number, error description. Right. So now when it's successful, we'll get this message and it will be displayed here. If there's an error, it's going to build this string and then just jump when on the go to, it's going to come to here and display it. Now, another thing I like to do with message box is have a different icon for success and one for failure. Now, if you have the immediate window open down the bottom, or just press Control G if you don't, and it'll take you there. You can type something in like message box, and let's just say hi. All right, this doesn't add to the code, it's just a temporary thing. We just got hi with a button, right? There's no icon, but we can change that. Comma, VB information, and you can also add the buttons that you want. So VB OK, we just want only, and that's the default anyway. So now as you see, I've got that information icon, hi, and the OK button, which was there anyway. You can put yes, no buttons, cancel, and so on. Now I want different icons for success and failure. So I'll have information for success and critical for errors. So we're going to define another variable called dim. You can call it whatever you like, but message style. And this is a VB MSG message box style. All right, that's the data type. And if you type part of the word, hold control and space of the variable, it should complete it for you. Equals. And now we're going to put in our VB information and OK only button. We can do the same down in the error section as well. But this time I want critical. VB, I can type in CRIT, control space, or I can type in the whole name. Right, so now whenever we get a successful execution, this will be the message and the icon. It'll pop it up here. I need to add that variable here. Well, style. Okay, and so now we'll get variable message and variable icon depending on success or failure. Now there is one other thing that I like to add to my template error handler, and that is to disable certain settings when my macro starts, and at the end I always re-enable it. And I do have another video where I discuss them in details, so please check that out on settings that you should disable during your macro. So I already have a subroutine which does this for me. Disable settings, and at the beginning I do true, so it will disable them. And because I always want this to be re-enabled on error, I just put this in here as well. So we go to the always run section, but this time I'll say false, meaning it will re-enable them. And I can show you that subroutine here. It's explained in more detail in that video that I mentioned. So essentially you're going to set calculations to manual, disable display alerts, screen updating, and enable events. And then when I re-enable them, it does the opposite. Now you don't need to do this. You could also just do them individually. If you just want to disable the screen updating while your macro is running, you could just do that instead and then re-enable it. But make sure you re-enable it in this section here, so it always runs. Okay. So that's essentially my skeleton that I use for all my parent subroutines that I will be putting error handling into. As I mentioned, I don't add it to every single one. Now what we're going to do is copy this code down and make it work with our error handling so that we close our workbook. So first I'll just copy the variables down and then the code. Copy it all the way down to, and we'll put it in our main code before the message. All right, so we're going to open our workbook, set this value in B2, force the error, and then close. Now, I always want this to close on error or success. So we're going to move this out of here and put it down into here. We want to close it. We always want it to close. However, in this case, I don't want it to save if it fails. You may want to, depending on the requirements. But in this case, I only want to save it if it was successful. So I'm going to add another variable. I'm going to call it save WB. All right. So let's go and declare it up the top. Dim save WB as, and it's a Boolean, so true or false. All right. So at the very end here, because it was successful, I want to set this to true. All right. Save it. And down in the error, however, I want to set it to false. And this way, it will not save the workbook, but it will close it if there was an error. So now let's see this in action. And what I'm going to do is use the debugger so I can step through the code. If you haven't used a debugger, please check out my video on that. It is a very useful tool, especially if you're going to be writing a fair bit of macros. So what I'll do, I'm going to add a breakpoint here. That's going to make the code execution stop at this point. And then I'm going to my button, on my error handler button, and it's going to trigger that subroutine. All right, so it's stopping here, and I'm just going to show you what happens. So F8 is going to do line by line. So open the workbook. There you go. There's the workbook that's open. I'll just Alt-Tab back to the code. It sets the value in B2. And here we're going to get an error. Now, unlike before where we got that VBA default message box with a debug and end, it's going to jump down to our error handler. As you can see, it's come down to the error. We didn't get that message box. And now it's building the message string. Again, if you come down to this immediate window, you can do a question mark, which is like print space MSG, and hit enter, and you can see what it contains. All right, so error importing customer details, that's a subroutine, and that's the error number and description. You can hover over it as well and see it there. And then I'll click back to here and F8. So we've got our critical icon, and save workbook, we set it to false. So I keep pressing F8 to do line by line. And now it's going to jump back up to our error handler exit. It comes up to here. And now it's going to do the close. And because it's false, it's just going to close it and not save it. All right, so we've closed the workbook. It's disappeared. And now I'm going to re-enable my settings. I'll just press Shift F8 to just execute that whole subroutine in one go rather than line by line. And now we're going to pop up the message. So we have our critical icon and we got our message. And click OK, and F5 will just finish it there. All right. Now I'll show you without the error. So this is going to be a success. I'll comment that line of code out and we'll run it again. All right, so F8, open the workbook again. So you see it doesn't have that value in B2 because we did not save it. Come back to here. Now I'm going to set it, and there's the value. And this time there was no error, and so we're going to build a different message and icons as well. And we are going to save the workbook. So F8, set it to true. So as we come down to the workbook close, save workbook boolean is true. It's going to close it and save it. And here is our message, and this time we get a success. All right, the information icon and our successful message. And it's done. And I'll just run it again to show you that it saved the workbook, okay? Here, open the workbook, and there you go. It saved it. And here, again, we're going to save it. All right. Now, there's one more thing. If the workbook wasn't open for some reason, maybe perhaps you had some code up here where it failed before you actually opened the workbook, or there was an error opening the workbook, then that close statement, the way it's written, is going to fail. And so you're going to drop down to the error handler again, and you're just going to keep looping. So we need to check if the workbook variable actually has something in it. So what we can do is if WB is nothing equals false, then we close and save the workbook, or don't save it depending on the value of the variable. And this is going to stop any errors occurring if we had an issue before we open the workbook. All right. I'm going to rename this workbook to one that doesn't exist. So when it tries to open it, we will get an error, and WB variable will be nothing, and it won't execute the close because it hasn't opened anything, and that's what we want. Again, I'm just going to set a breakpoint here, trigger the macro. This doesn't exist, so you can see it's jumped down to our error. We build the message, don't save. Because WB is nothing, you might be able to see it as I hover over it, or I can come down to immediate window, question mark, WB is nothing. So you're asking it, is WB nothing? Yes, it's nothing. So that means it wasn't opened, so we don't need to close it. There you go. And that's it. What you would do is copy that template and use it for all your subroutines that you want error handling in. Well, thank you for watching this video. I hope you found it useful. If you did, please hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss out on any future videos. If you have any questions, please post them in the comments below. Thanks again. We'll see you in the next video.